Hi, and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Vic Karana, the Care Home Development Director with Outside Clinic, and I'm delighted to be hosting the second of our 4-strong Discover Domiciliary webinars. This aims to provide optometrists at all levels with a 360-degree view of what it's like to work in the sector. Domiciliary eye care was recently cited in the GOC Resident Survey as the most satisfying area to work in optometry, and yet we know from many questions we get asked that many optometrists simply aren't aware of what it entails or the broad range of career opportunities that exist. As the UK's largest provider of home eye care services, we're on a mission to change this, hence why we've launched this webinar series. The first session, which, if you missed it, is available to watch at outsideclinic.co.uk/discover, provided an introduction to the exciting world of domiciliary optometry, spotlighting how home eye tests are done, the mobile equipment and the record card keeping systems that are used, and the communication skills required to deliver a great patient experience. This webinar will build on that introduction, spotlighting the key differences between high street and domiciliary optometry. Over the course of the next 50 minutes, we'll cover a broad range of differences from the types of patients that are seen and the working environment through to the testing equipment that's used, the clinical and governance support that's available, and the patient referral process. I say we because it won't just be me running through the differences. I'm joined by an expert panel of optometrists from the company, all of whom have experience of working both on the high street and in domiciliary. They are Paul Chapman-Hatchett, Director of Strategic Partnerships, and the man who heads up our newly launched joint venture partnership program. Janara Islam, who is a super optometrist and one of our professional services optometrists based in Hampshire. We also have Kiranjeet Matharu, who is also a super optometrist based in Birmingham. So now that you've met our expert panel of speakers, let's kick off the first session by first of all looking at the key differences between the high street and domiciliary when it comes to testing equipment. So I feel there's a bit of a myth surrounding the kit supplied in the high street compared to the kit that we get in domiciliary. So is there much rivalry between the kits for optometrists?
I think it's a great question. I think we get asked that a lot when we're looking to recruit new optoms into the domiciliary sector. I think one of the things that I always say to optoms is that there's an expectation when you're filling out a GOS 6 site test form to do the site test to the same standards as you'd expect in the high street. So clearly the equipment is different, but what I always explain to people is that we have fundamentally the same equipment, especially the key bits of equipment, but they're portable.
Okay. And surely optometrists, are they surprised by that? Because I kind of based on the myth and what they may have heard on the grapevine, are they surprised when they come across the kit that they?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, and obviously we're really fortunate that we keep investing in all the new equipment that comes onto the market. So we have access to some really upmarket modern fundus cameras, which are fantastic, take great images. And obviously the clients like it. They like the fact that we have access to this equipment, and obviously from a record keeping point of view, it's great to know that you've got those records for future.
I think it's the fundus camera especially that surprises me. I didn't even think or know that was even available to optometrists. You know.
I think the litmus test for how good our equipment is what the patients say. So when we're in the routine, we bring out this equipment, they are just amazed by it, and I think that's the key thing. It's how appreciated the patients are that we can offer them this level of technology in their home. I
suppose that's the difference, is that optometrists are surprised potentially by the kit, but you don't think actually the patient's going to be taken aback by it as well?
Definitely. That's
not something you take into account. I suppose I didn't think of it from that perspective.
And I think also we're always looking out at the next thing. Obviously, a lot of high street practices now have OCTs. There are some portable OCTs that are being looked at and being developed. And again, I think as an organisation, as a company, we're looking to invest in those kind of modern bits of kit. So hopefully, as and when those become available, I think that will be a real game changer for us as well, and really further enhance the services that we can offer in people's own homes.
I suppose it's really being ahead of the curve all the time, just to make sure that patients get the best out of the service, isn't it?
And I think it can be different for optometrists when they start working for us, looking at the different pieces of equipment. But once you get really used to them, you realise how much thought has gone into getting these just right. We have so much time and energy invested from head office and from field optometrists to make sure that all of our kit is really lightweight, it's really robust, it's durable, it's user friendly, and it works for our demographic. So it may be odd to go back to using a trial frame compared to a phoropter head, but actually for an 80-something-year-old, it's much more comfortable to wear a trial frame than to keep leaning forward and trying to get themselves into a position that's not comfortable. So our equipment is designed for us, and it helps our patients, and it really helps you do a good job.
I think that's really interesting, because actually the innovations in kit are born from the people on the road.
Yeah.
That's the difference, I think, here, because actually it's not people saying, oh, maybe they should have this, maybe they should have that. It's the optometrists coming together and going, guys, we should get this kit because this is the best. And I think if it starts from that.
And you're really listened to. Yeah, if you put feedback in, it will definitely be listened to. And it will be rolled out faster than you realise. And it will be rolled out across everybody faster than you realise.
I think especially true during the pandemic, especially because there was an award, wasn't there, for the
Face shield.
The face shield, that's it, the face shield. I mean, that was something that was developed by an optometrist, and then straight away it's picked up and rolled out, which is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think also as you were saying, with the kit, I think we've designed a new bag so that it's as light as possible, but it's as safe as possible to carry what is obviously very valuable bits of equipment that we need to protect. Which is fantastic, and it makes it all very portable. I think one of the other concerns that people have when they come into the domiciliary sector is the weight of the kit, and I think we've worked really hard to make sure that we minimise that weight as much as we can.
Yeah, everything's lightweight. It's all cushioned well, and I find it's almost like having your own little mobile desk. Because now I can turn up to a patient's house and just put it on the side, open the top, and within moments I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Our equipment has also evolved. So when I first started out 13 years ago, it was very different to what it is now. I'll just take, for example, the test chart here, which this is the latest model, and it is probably 70% lighter than what we originally had, which was a standard Snellen chart. You had bulbs at the back which would blow regularly, and having something electronic and lightweight like this makes a huge difference. So yeah, I think the fact that I always say to the patients, year on year, the equipment is getting better, it's getting lighter, it's getting more portable, it's making our job a lot easier.
I think it's a choice, isn't it, whether you choose to stay with the kit, because that kit is still available.
Yes.
That kit is still available for you to use, for the organisation to order for you, but the difference is just recognising, actually there's better stuff out there, there's better kit out there, let's get it, let's invest in it and make life better for our patients and our optometrists, isn't it? So.
You're absolutely right, Vic, and we're sometimes given a choice. So obviously a lot of our optometrists will use a direct ophthalmoscope, but we do have panoptics that you can use as well, and a few of them even do indirect ophthalmoscopy, a few of them. So you're given the freedom and the professional freedom and the choice to use the bits that you think are going to work best for you.
And how about from the kit aside, how about the just general clinical support? Because I kind of feel that you're out there on your own often, and you kind of maybe in a situation where it's a bit tricky and you need that additional piece of support or advice or direction from somebody. Is that available for you?
Absolutely. Our pro services department are fantastic. I sort of joke that they always answer by the second or the third ring, so they're brilliant. They're at the end of a phone, and the pro services optometrists are quite happy to have a chat with you about something you might be finding tricky. Usually you know the answer. You just need that little sort of optom next door, friendly face to run through it and look at it perhaps from another viewpoint, and they'll very much guide you to the right sort of outcome. It's not a case of telling you what to do. You probably know what you need to do or what's best to do. They'll just give you a different viewpoint and support you. So it's fantastic to be able to fall on.
So it's kind of that reassurance.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think it's really important as well, isn't it, when people join the sector, that, like you say, particularly if you're fairly newly qualified, to have that confidence to know that somebody's got your back, somebody's going to support you. And I think, as you were saying, in my experience, 99% of the time, the optometrist knows exactly what they need to do. But it's really nice just to have somebody at the end of the phone saying, yes, 100%, I agree with that. It's the right way forward. And certainly from the JVP point of view, I think a lot of our guys have found that a really useful attribute and something that's of great value to them, knowing that they can always call on that help.
And I think that's actually something that could potentially be missing from the practice environment, because if you're the sole optometrist in a practice, or the optometrist is constantly busy next door, it's quite challenging to say, oh, knock on the door and say, can you come and check this for me? We're actually having someone almost on speed dial, the optometrist next door, as you said, it is great. So they're just sitting and waiting for your call. That's brilliant, right?
And they'll have access to the same record that you're potentially looking at as well. They can pull up old records. Sometimes they can look at a little bit of information faster than we can almost. So they're on board very quickly.
That's fantastic. And the professional services team, from a referral perspective, because you said that they're there for advice and reassurance, and I suppose that takes into account when you want to refer a patient for something in particular and the speed at which you want to refer them. Is that something the professional service team support you in?
So the professional services team, the referral process differs in different parts of the country. Okay. So in Hampshire, they have a set referral process. In Surrey, they might have a different process. So the pro services team are aware of that. In certain parts, we would do routine referrals through the doctor, in which case we'd write a referral letter on our data file. It would get printed off there and then at the patient's house. So therefore the patient has a copy of that referral letter, and then that letter may be posted to the GP, so the letter gets put in the courier bag and then sent to the head office, who can post it and frank this envelope and send it off. For other referrals, you have urgent referrals. So there might be a case where you'd like the patient to be seen maybe in the next few weeks. And then in that case, you would ring up the pro services team and say, well, I'd like this referral sent to the hospital as an urgent process. And they would fax the letter directly to the hospital service. They give you a courtesy call or a message to say that actually the referral is in hand at the hospital, so you're aware that that's done, which gives you peace of mind. And most of the time, if we do get referral and feedback from the hospital, the pro service do copy you in with the referral outcome if the consultant provides it to you. So you're always in the loop every step of the time. There is also processes for wet AMD. There's a rapid access referral. So if you suspect a wet AMD referral, you phone up directly. You just say, I want this referral done for wet AMD. They ask you the pro services team will ask you which hospital do you want it referred to and whether they need hospital transport. You fill in your report and that's it. It's as simple as that. The whole process is taken out of your hands. You don't need to worry about it. And again, you'd get a message at the end to say that that referral is in hand. So it makes referral so much easier because the whole admin side of it is taken away.
It's interesting because I think that's something that would worry me a little bit, and that if, as a domiciliary optometrist, you go from different areas and the referral process will differ, and you think, oh, have I got it right this time? Is it the right process for here? Yeah. And the fact that they know what to do for specific areas is just puts your mind at rest, doesn't it? I
think it's also great that there's also a fail-safe system in the morning. So the next day, within pro services, there's a system of making sure that every referral that was completed yesterday has been done and has been actioned. Which again, I think from an optometry point of view, out in the field, puts your mind at rest to know that that things have actually been done. And done in a timely fashion, which I think is really important.
And I understand that from a referral perspective, printed out in the patient's home, that's great, and then it gets couriered. But in a care home environment where you're seeing maybe 5 or 6 or 7 patients, it can be quite challenging to sort of stop print out the referral between patients. Does the process differ with the care home environment?
For me, when I worked in practice, referrals, if you do feel that you can trust someone enough to leave them a referral to action for you, they still put it under general admin in their head. So this is just general admin. Whereas pro services, they know how important referrals are. Absolutely. And they'll deal with it faster, and they'll deal with it with the correct level of importance that we as optometrists would want to give it.
Yeah, and obviously with the care home environment, what we're looking to do is make sure that all the referrals are done centrally. So you will contact pro services, and they will organise all of the referrals from a head office point of view. So again, you know that they're being done in a timely fashion.
That's good. So something else in terms of domiciliary, obviously the most patients we see are of a certain age, and dilation is incredibly important. So how does that work in domiciliary in terms of risks, etc.? Is that something you do, don't do, scared to do?
I think that differs for every optom, and you have to find where you're comfortable with all of that. Obviously, once you have all the information to hand, it's something that I've discussed with a lot of optometrists, because I think I used to be more cautious to dilate, given the potential risks. I know the risk of closed angle glaucoma is tiny, but trying to move one of our patients to the eye department is difficult, even with planning involved. So if it needs to be done quickly, it's even harder. But having said that, once you know that the risk is so small and you discuss things with patients, over time you learn your way to get the right information across to a patient. Everything is done with consent, and once you explain to a patient that dilating their pupils, particularly when they're elderly and they've got the media opacities, is going to help to get a better view at the back of their eyes, as long as they understand it, most patients tend to go with it. And I think as a company, we probably dilate about half on average, half of our patients.
Yeah, we're probably less now, so since we've come out the amber phase. But during the, since the pandemic started, I think the amount of dilation increased probably threefold, and it's probably less so now. But I still dilate if I think I'm not going to get a good view. I would prefer to dilate. I always give the patient the option, and I explain what the benefits are, what the risks are. And as Kieran said, it's about relaying the risk in a way that will not scare them off, but be honest at the same time with the risk of angle closure. Yeah.
I think we also, obviously we leave the literature, don't we, afterwards. So we're leaving them a form, explain to them what we've done, and also should they experience any symptoms that they're aware of what those symptoms are, and to contact us should they occur. And I've experienced it once in my career. I think it's something you have to bear in mind, you have to think about. But I think there's no doubt that the pros outweigh the cons in terms of being able to do a better assessment of the health of the eyes, particularly as you say, if there's a lot of lens opacities, you want to make sure you can do the best job you can. I think I'd always actively encourage people to dilate.
I think my gauge is like, if this was a member of my family, what would I want them to have? And I think, absolutely, dilating is, like you said, the pros and cons.
I think in the care home setting, I think it needs just to make sure we have that discussion with the carer, the lead carer. If you've got somebody who's got dementia, and particularly somebody who's maybe got quite a strong prescription, who doesn't wear glasses anymore, sometimes dilating them can really, really throw them, because obviously their vision will deteriorate significantly. So I think, again, it's about making sure that the people who care for these individuals are aware of what might happen, and just make sure that they're well looked after for the 2 or 3 hours after dilation, whilst the drops are wearing off.
That does make sense. I mean, of course you've got your checks with the patient from a consent perspective, but then of course you've got to take into account the carers that are going to be looking after them, and then of course the carers that will come on the next shift that are going to be keeping an eye on them as well and looking after them. So if they are living with dementia, it's really key that we put in those checks in place to make sure everybody is aware of what's going on,
The useful thing with, from an optometrist point of view, is that dilating, the way that we do it, it keeps your clinic flowing smoothly still. It's not a case of having to rebook people in because they've driven and then having to squeeze them into other appointments another day, and then your clinic starts to run behind. Nothing like that happens, because when you're with that patient, you're 100% with that patient, and until you leave, you're just meeting all of their needs. So it's quite useful that you tackle everything and deal with pretty much everything then and there, apart from the odd patient that needs electronic visual fields.
Sure. I suppose that truly is a patient-centered approach. And its meaning in itself. It's literally, you can't get better than that, surely.
And it's smooth and stress-free for us as well. You don't have to have a mental checklist of all the patients you need to look up at again next week or in a few months' time. You deal with things as you go, and then when you leave work, you're done. Yeah.
And I think you're saying to the patient, aren't you, that be careful with walking around your house when you've been dilated. Even with you've got your glasses on, your vision's going to feel slightly odd. You might feel slightly unbalanced. Obviously, these people are more at risk of falls. But I think most of them understand, and certainly they've got the people we see in their own homes understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and they understand that for a couple of hours they've just got to be a little bit more careful.
Sure. And we talked about professional service earlier. How about from a clinical governance perspective, though? In terms of protecting the optometrists, optical advisors, optical assistants, sorry. So from protecting the optometrists to the optical assistants, the professional services look after you in that respect as well?
Yeah, I think the outside clinic has got the most comprehensive clinical governance support I have seen of any company, even on the high street. So we clinically audit records. So regularly a pro service team will look at a record, and if there's something that we feel may need to have been added or has been omitted, then we will email the optom and just flag this up. Not as a you've done something wrong, but just as a flag, just to say, oh, have you thought about this? And then the optom might reply and say, well, actually, I did miss this and I would have done it again. So that just keeps us on our toes with regards to making sure our record keeping is up to a great standard. We also do observations on optoms. So when they're out in the field, now since the pandemic, we're doing Zoom observations remotely, and we'll observe the test from start to finish, and at the end of the test give the optom the feedback. Again, where things might be could be improved on, or what I find regularly as a pro services optom is I observe lots of different optoms doing routines, and I pick up hints and tips that I personally would benefit from. So it's a great position to be in, to be able to share all those tips with all the other optoms. So I think there is a sort of apprehension about having another optom watching you doing a test. But for me, I welcome that feedback, because I know it's going to improve me as an optometrist, and ultimately then improve the service that I can give to the patients. So, yeah.
I think that's incredibly important. That's our continuous improvement. I think it happens at all levels of an organisation that's run really well, in that people are always willing to learn, continually improve, work together, listen. I think the sharing ideas is a great point, in that even if you are a seasoned domiciliary optometrist, by observing something else, go, crikey, I didn't think of that. I think it's also fantastic that you can still do an observation in domiciliary, the fact that we've adapted with Zoom or in just different technologies to do that, because I suppose in practice you may get an observation that's easy, you just kind of sit in the room with you, and the fact that we've adapted and embraced that, it's again narrowing the gap between high street and domiciliary, right?
Yeah.
It also has its advantages, because when you do it via Zoom, you can have professional service optometrists watching you from any corner of the UK. So sometimes I might get one optometrist, sometimes I get another one, and they all have something different to add. So it does have its pros as well.
And I think culturally, as a profession, we've got more used to the CPD and the ongoing training. Certainly in the time that I've been qualified, that's been a big change, that continuous education. And I think there's much more openness now to an optometrist expecting to be audited or to be reviewed. Interestingly enough, obviously, as we know, Outside Clinic invested in a couple of businesses and has incorporated them into Outside Clinic over the last 18 months. And there's been quite a few optoms who've been proactive and saying, actually, could you come and audit my records? Can you have a look at some of my records, and can you tell me, where can I get better? How can I improve? And I think that's the key, isn't it? And I think pro services are very good at sending that message out to people, saying this isn't a critique, this is about constant improvement, and how do we get you to be a better optometrist, which serves your patient better and also serves you as an optometrist better.
Yeah, we're aiming for the gold standard, but you'll help to get there with a huge amount of support.
In the high street, you tend to have fixed appointment times, 25 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes. I imagine that's not quite the same in domiciliary, both for the care home environment and depending how their day is going, versus the home visits, because like you said, it's a really patient-centred approach, and I can imagine the appointments must vary depending on the patient needs, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate that scheduling ring our first client in the morning, so that that client is expecting us at 9 o'clock or whatever time our first appointment is. And then after that, there's an expectation that once you've finished with your client, or when you arrive at your first client, you then ring the second client and say, just to let you know, I'll be with you at a certain time, however long that's going to take you to get there. So that's great, because you know that your next client is expecting you and is ready, and also has a feel for what time you're going to be there. And when we schedule the appointments for the home visits, we don't tell people exactly what time we're going to be there. So there is a degree of flexibility, which is great. I think from a care home perspective, it's obviously slightly different. It's much more important that we're going to be there for a morning or an afternoon or potentially all day. So then we have some systems in place to make sure that, first of all, obviously when we do the booking, we confirm the date, but also that we do a follow-up check a week before we go to make sure that the care home is still expecting us, just to make sure the list is still correct, that they've got no other issues they want to talk to us about or any other clients they want us to see. So there's comprehensive structures in place.
I think the degree of front-end support to arrange the care home side of things seems a lot more. I suppose it has to be, because of the numbers of patients you're dealing with, the number of staff involved in the care home.
Yeah, no, I think so, and it does require more upfront work, just to make sure that, as I say, that we're seeing the right people. That if anybody's moved into hospital, or if people have moved, or there's any changes, that we're on top of that, and we make sure that that when the optometrist goes, that they have the most up-to-date list of patients that we want them to see, so that they can work as efficiently as possible whilst they're there.
Yeah. When we visit people in homes, I don't think I would mind waiting for an appointment if I was in my comfy chair watching TV.
It just happens when it happens.
It just happens, yeah. Unless they turn up when my favourite programme's on. Yeah, so people don't tend to mind. And even if you do not meet their expectations, so if they have an idea of what time they thought you were coming and then you don't turn up at that time, by the time you leave, they've generally changed their mind, because they've realised how we work. They've seen how patient-focused we are, how for the 50 or so minutes that we're with them, the focus is entirely on them, and very often they've changed their mind. They realise and have a bit of sympathy for what we're doing by the end of it, I tend to find.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I've been involved with clinics on the high street as well, and it's that I kind of feel there is an element of pressure though, because if you're working literally to the rule of every 25 minutes, for example, it's that pressure of clock watching to a certain extent, which I really don't like, and I kind of feel it takes away from the patient-centred approach. If I'm more worried about the time, am I going to make it am I in time for the next patient coming in? So is that not so much the case?
Definitely not. No, because I personally give my patients, when I call ahead, a window of about an hour, and I very rarely get anybody saying anything whereby they don't tend to have any problems with that. Yeah, so you give them quite a wide window of when you may be there, and because they've been forewarned, they've usually cleared their diary if there is anything that they need to know. Yeah, and that said, sometimes we turn up and the carers happen to turn up at the same time, or the district nurse turns up at the same time. But it's about having that flexibility and realising that they've got lots of needs, and you work it out as you go. Yeah.
Good. Sorry, Paul.
No, I was just going to say about the TV. Do you not find that sometimes you go in there and they say, I've got my favourite TV programme, and they say, do you mind if I just mute it? And you think, well, maybe if you wouldn't mind just actually physically turn the TV off so you could just focus on the eye test, that would be great. Yeah. Sorry, a bit of an anecdote.
And what are the most favourite programmes that you come across that they're watching? Is it Tipping
Loose
Point?
Swimming.
Loose Swimming.
Yeah, Loose Swimming. Good morning.
And Tipping Point.
This morning.
And this is the only opportunity I get to watch daytime TVs because I don't watch it at home at all. So yeah, it's interesting television, daytime television.
I was stunned to see that Murder, She Wrote still plays on the TV. One of my favourites from when I was little, so it's still on now. Well, there you go. So in terms of, I mean, it's great they have the flexibility of like appointment times, which is brilliant. But when it comes to the sort of the record card and the flexibility, because again, I think been doing this for when I test eyes, I was doing it from when it was on paper, of course, and you had your fixed record card, and you followed the boxes, and it was really difficult to go your own way with the card and make it your own because you had to follow these certain boxes, etc. How is how does the record card work? You know, can you make it bespoke to yourself? Is it flexible?
It definitely is. So we've got sections that are expanded, so you can tap on them in any order that suits you. And each section is highly customizable. So you can add in the bits that you feel you need. Some of them are there already, but you can add in a lot of information and detail yourself. So it makes it quite quick to input data. And once you finish that section and you click out of it and all the mandatory data is filled in, it will change colour. So you can see at a glance what you've done and what still needs doing. And what's useful about being able to enter it in any order is that you can, again, work to your patient's needs. So, for instance, some of our dementia patients may be able to do quite well with an eye test for quite a while, and they'll be able to engage with you and have a lot of energy, but they'll start to fatigue. So if you know that, you can focus on the bits that are most important that you've elicited during your history and symptoms and deal with those first. So it is useful being able to do it in a different order.
So you just adapt as you go along. You mentioned about the colours changing. That sounds really useful in terms of going back to the auditing stuff that we were talking about earlier. So what happens there?
And so the boxes are red. When you finish them, they go colourless.
So each section, there are some sections you cannot move forward until you have completed them. So they will appear red. Computer says you cannot go. Stop at the red line. And so there are some tests you physically can't do on certain patients. You might not be able to do RET on a certain patient because their media opacities are so dense. But there are options and boxes where you can press to say not possible, so that you can move forward if you can't do a certain test. So it allows you that flexibility to say, actually, I've thought about doing this process. For example, I might wish to do an Amsler chart on a patient, but their fixation is nowhere near close enough to the tablet for me to do that. So I would tick the box that says not possible and I can move on. But that shows that you have had some thought process into the fact that you wanted to do the Amsler because you want to have a further look at the macula. So again, that helps to make your record keeping a bit more thorough as well.
And you can embellish that.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think as you were referring to the preferences, I think are really, really key parts of the system. So you can set your preferences, because we all have slightly different ways of phrasing an order in which we ask questions, either in the history and symptoms, past ocular history, whatever it is. So actually to have your preferences and then have them in the order that you want them. So I have on my system, my first thing that I put in my history and symptoms is where we're at with our COVID requirements and what PPE I'm wearing. Sure. So that I have that documented, and obviously as and when that changes, I change that preference button. But what it does is then puts a clear record on there of what PPE I was wearing on the day of the test, which I think is important. So yeah, the preferences are really key.
So you maintain that kind of individuality as an optometrist, even though it's a digital record card and there's set boxes, you can change it, adapt it to suit how you work, how you speak, and the terminology you use?
Definitely. For example, there are certain clinical findings we talk about regularly, and we regurgitating the same information again. One is cataracts, one is advice for macular degeneration. So for preferences, when I want to talk about macular degeneration, I talk about diet, vitamin supplements, UV protection. Instead of having to write that out again and again and again, it's all done in one box. You literally press one button and all of that information comes up. So this is a time saving feature of our tablet. When optoms first start, they find the recording quite difficult. They find it quite time consuming. And once they've got their preferences set, I say to them, it saves probably 10 minutes per testing time getting their preferences set.
I think for me, that is fantastic for a patient living with dementia, because you do often have a window of opportunity where you've got their concentration, they're engaging with you really well, and sometimes very quickly that can be gone, sadly. And I think if you can adapt the buttons to allow for that speed. So it's not about testing quickly, it's about testing efficiently, right? And actually that allows you to do that, because I think you don't want to be, you could spend ages focusing on filling in a box, and you actually just want to move on to the next one because you've got their attention, they're engaging really well, you're going to get a great test out of it. So that's really good, right?
Yeah, and I think also as a final point on that, the one thing I really like about the preference boxes is that you, particularly in the comments box at the end of the test, you can flag it so you can have it printed out on the prescription as well. So again, when you're talking about your AMD preventions, you can write those on the record card, but also have them print out so that the patient can see them for future reference. You know, make sure you wear sunglasses, or make sure you take these supplements, whatever it is. So that's also really nice, because then you can have them on both.
That really is going above and beyond, though. That's being more, isn't it? Because actually you could hand over a prescription with a bunch of numbers, which, let's be honest, doesn't mean a great deal to a patient, right? But having that extra information on there, that is being more, that's adding more value to the sight test for them, you know?
It's great for the patient, it's great for the next of kin and the carers, but it's great for you as an optom, because it means you're not having to write it out.
And for the
You've
next
written it
optom.
once, and you've written it, yeah, you don't have to be saying, oh, actually, I recommended those drops, so let me write it down for you. And it looks much more professional as well when it's written, and they're like, what, you know, the patients are impressed by that.
Let's not get started in our handwriting. So yes, it's probably good for that. But for the next optometrist, because quite often, I imagine more so with a home visit actually, they pull out the previous prescription because they're housebound. They're less likely to lose it potentially, so they'll have last year's prescription and get it out. And if you can see the notes on there as well, that's fantastic. Because, you know, it might not necessarily have been yourselves, or, you know, but for the next optometrist, that's useful, right?
And I think what Paul said is correct, and about being able to add extra information to the sight test prescription that we print out. But actually that ties into the patient booklet that we leave them as well, which is really comprehensive. It's A4 sized and it's several pages long. It introduces us as a company, it puts patients' mind at rest as to how we work and who we are. And then you've got your common pathology that you also mentioned, I tend to circle it, but it's kind of like, I'd say it's like a shorter version of the College of Optometrists sort of information leaflets. So from our point of view, it's peace of mind that they've actually got some information about, say, flashes and floaters or cataracts that they can refer back to. It goes through and it also explains the choices that they've gone for with dispenses and all the extra additional things we do, like magnifiers and drops. It puts a lot of information there, so it helps them to remember, and it means we've given everything we need to.
That's absolutely invaluable for a patient that's living at home. Because actually, if you're in the high street, you can walk out and go, oh, I'll go and look up this, or I'll speak to my friend about this. But actually, they might not have that opportunity, so they need something to refer to, right? So I mean, that's invaluable to leave that behind. Again, I've said it before, that is just going that extra bit further.
I think the thing I do with the booklet is, when I'm doing the dispense, is I actually open the booklet.
Yeah.
And then I go through, because there's a little bit about thinner lenses, there's a little bit about our frame range and why there's difference in costs. So actually, it's a really nice visual way to sit down with the patient and say, you know, I'm recommending this type of lens, and here are some of the reasons, and this is some of the stuff that we do. And it also means that when they've gone and the next of kin say, you know, what sort of lenses did you have, they can refer back, and like you say, I circle which type of lens I've recommended, so that again, it's a really easy way for them to reference why we've recommended what we've recommended.
It's transparency though, right, as well?
It's open and honest.
Yeah, well, that's the key. I think if you're sitting in someone's house and it's just you and the patient, you need to have that transparency, that honesty, so that the next of kin can feel reassured if they're not there. It's all right, everything was discussed, there's all the information there for you. And that's really key, especially in that environment, you know, when you're looking after their loved ones. So
I think just going back as well to your point about the booking times, I think one of the other great things that we have is that we don't know when we go in to see the patient how long each appointment's going to last, because some of them might be very routine, they might be very happy with what they've got. It would be a much more straightforward eye exam. Some of them might require referrals, or more complicated, or require more advice and take longer. And I think one of the great things about our system is that you can kind of flex and expand the appointment times depending on their needs, and there's never a pressure to say, I know there's somebody sitting outside, you know, going back to what you were saying earlier about that 25-minute you know, yes, okay, you might be running a bit late, but actually you don't have somebody sitting outside the door waiting, which I find very reassuring.
And the fact that you're phoning them before that you get there as well, and you know, and when you're on your way or whatever it might be, the fact that they're just constantly informed, and I think that's really important, because if they're kept waiting, they don't know where you are and when you're going to come, that's quite tricky, especially for a patient living or a resident living on their own, and just not knowing when the doorbell's going to ring. That constant communication is absolutely key, that reassurance, you know. Just, I suppose, from a personal perspective, you know, I think it's great we have this flexibility from the appointment times, the kit. What about personally though, you know, the variety of the role from a personal perspective? How does this suit your life, your lifestyle? Do you have to, does it work for you? Can you know, is it 5 days and you have to do 5 days? How does it?
So I personally work 3 days a week because I'm a mum of 2, and that works really well with me. I have my working days where I put all my effort into my work, but then when I'm done, I can leave it, I can put it to one side, and I can carry on with being a mum and whatever else I want to do now that the little one's gone to school for 2 days a week. So that works brilliantly for me. And I know that the company does have scope to look at sort of different working hours in terms of the length of your day. I think the key thing to say is just have a chat with us, and have a chat with all the people at head office, and yeah, they can be quite flexible.
Definitely. I personally work 5 days a week, but we have the flexibility. So for instance, there might be times when my husband is away and I have to do school runs, so I'll just email scheduling just to let them know on this day I have to get back early, which they're totally fine with, and your schedules can be arranged to accommodate that. And the key there, I think, is communication. Communicate, let scheduling know. If you're running late in the morning, which happens to us all, let them know. They can let the first patient know that actually you're running late. And the patients really appreciate that. Things don't always go to plan, but they're kept in the loop. That fills them with confidence.
Yeah. And I also feel like, as individuals, it feels genuine and honest that the company want to invest in us as people and want us to be happy. So recently I finished a programme called Tasting Colours that's been offered to all of our staff across the board. And it's a 6-week programme that's 6 hours you spend doing it within company time, that's all about well-being. And it's encouraging you to find balance in yourself, because if you're feeling good about yourself, then you're going to feel good at work. It all ties in together. So I do feel we're invested in quite well. Yeah. So if we're doing well and if we're happy, then it filters out. It helps all of our colleagues. It helps our patients. Everything becomes smoother and you're happier at work.
Yeah, and I think there's also opportunities, isn't there, within the organisation to do other roles. And you're involved in the pro services. You and I are involved in some management roles. I think one of the beauties of the company is that if you want to move your career in a certain direction, there is those opportunities to do that. We certainly on the JV side, the JVP side, we talk to most of our guys about the fact that it's probably a 3-day-a-week minimum opportunity. I think there's a lot to learn in the domiciliary side. There's a lot to learn on the record keeping. There's a lot to get used to in terms of going out and about. And I think if you don't commit a reasonable amount to it, it becomes a bit bitty, and I don't think you can really get on top of it. Yeah. So we talk about a 3-day-week minimum for our JVs, because it is a commitment to get to.
You mentioned there about being just generally out and about. That's like, again, one of the biggest differences in the domiciliary. But what's it like being out and about? The day in the life of domiciliary, it's a complete game changer, isn't it? In terms of being in that sort of consulting room for X hours a day. So, you know.
Well, I started Domi partly because I worked in a practice, and I used to, especially in the winter, commute up there in the morning, be dark, go into the practice, obviously be in that dark room all day, and then I'd leave at the end of the day and it was dark, and that whole day of my life I felt like it had passed me by.
No windows.
No vitamin D.
So I was that was one of the things that encouraged me to go into the domiciliary side in the first place, was that concept of actually being out and about and, you know, seeing the world.
I'm very fortunate that I live on the south coast, so every day I'm by the I'm by the sea. So, and in the summer, I think it's just, I feel so lucky to work in a job where I can look at this beauty. I mean, some days I go to the Isle of Wight on the ferry and I have to pinch myself thinking I'm getting paid to do this. It's great. And it just puts a smile on your face when you're out there. The sun is shining, even on a wintry day, you're driving along, you've got the autumnal leaves, and yeah, you don't get that in any other sector of optometry.
How did you find it? How did you land in that role?
Oh, well, I started when I got married. So I used to live in London. So I moved town, I moved job. And the main pull for me was not actually domiciliary, was the fact that we didn't work weekends. As a newlywed, I wanted to spend that time with my husband. Whereas previously in practice, I worked every Sunday, I worked 6 days a week, and I missed out on all those weekend family gatherings and events. And that was the pull for me. But when I actually started, what really, it got me hooked, it's the patients. And that's, I think, all the seasoned optometrists in domiciliary will say the same. It's the fact that you go in and you test. I think personally, I'm being biased, but the patients we test are the best people to test. They've lived through 2 world wars. I share the same values as them. They do. So I do talk to my patients not about non-optical stuff. I think that helps as well. It builds rapport between us too. It helps them and it helps me because I really enjoy my day. Kieran was just talking about earlier on how if you feel good, you'll feel good at work. It's the opposite for me. I feel good at work because I'm talking to my patients. We have a laugh. And I just feel that I'm making a difference, and they appreciate me. And I think in all walks of life, we all seek appreciation. We all want to feel like we're doing something valuable, and to have patients tell us that when we do a test, it makes you feel really good when you walk out of that house and go into your car. Actually, I've done a really good job, and they really appreciate what I've done.
I think that's really important. I mean, I certainly resonate with that because values are something that's really important to me as well. And I think, from an organisational perspective, the values that they hold are incredibly important. They're the sort of the tenets of the organisation, aren't they? And I think if you can emulate those, or you share similar values to the organisation as well, that's really key. And it's really important that we live those. It's not just something that's written on a wall, but the fact that you live those day in, day out. That's when values really make a difference. That's when the balance tips, and actually, they resonate with our patients and your colleagues. It's infectious, isn't it? If we all have the same sort of values and we all have that kind of moral compass, you can't really go wrong. What about yourself, Karen? How did you get into domiciliary? How did you land here?
I had a friend who was very involved in crisis at Christmas and who used to organise all the optometry side of it. And she went for an interview with the outside clinic, and she actually decided not to take the role, but she rang me and she said, I think you'll like the values of this organisation. And that's what drew me to it. It was the values, and that's what's kept me here as well. It's the values of the organisation. Yeah, absolutely. I can't put it in any straighter words.
No, it's important. It is important because then it's your why, isn't it? It's your reason for being of why you did it. And I think that's really important for if you're getting up out of bed every day, you've got to find your why, haven't you? Mm-hmm. And if that's yours, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think my story is very similar to. I mean, I didn't want to work Saturdays. I enjoy my sport, team sports. I really wanted to enjoy that, and obviously. Well, certainly 20 years ago, the Saturday was a really big part of optometry, a much bigger part than it is now. And I think one of the things that I've loved about the Domi is going through the patient journey. So, seeing clients, maybe they need cataract operations, maybe they need some treatment, maybe they just need glasses, whatever it is, and actually to really affect change on those people. And because often they're much more reliant, they can't just pop down to the high street to have these services. To be able to go in there, and I've always worked on the principle that I just imagine that person to be a relative of mine. Mm-hmm. And if they're a relative of mine, what would I want for that person if they were a relative? And am I satisfied with what I've done? And then I think, to go back and see a patient who you've referred for cataracts, and the first thing they always say to you is, I wish you told me to do this earlier, and you think, I did, I told you. I've been telling you for a couple of years now. But and to have that experience I find that really, really rewarding.
No, I get that. I think it's just this whole enablement. You're enabling people to do things that they otherwise would struggle to do on a day-to-day basis, and I don't think there's a better reward than that, surely. And it kind of gets you back to grassroots optometry, of why we did it in the first place, you know.
And I think also in the care home sector, which I know we haven't talked a lot about, I think one of the things that I was always very passionate about was, you know, engaging the activities coordinator and saying, you know, what does this person do, or what would they like to do? How can we affect their lives? I think there's sometimes could be a misconception that, oh, Mrs. Smith doesn't, you know, she's too demented to read anymore or to take part in activities. And actually, when you ask the question, well, you know, when she's doing her bingo, is she wearing her reading glasses? Oh no, we don't put any glasses on her. Well, you know, I'm not surprised she's not massively engaged. So I think it's really important that we can go into the care home environments where people may or may not have dementia, but where we can really affect change by asking the right questions and making sure that we've asked those.
It's interesting you say about that bingo comment, because I kind of reflect upon that, because when I first started in Domiciliary, you know, it was bingo cards and papers, and then as it changed, it became like digital, and now it's Kindles. And it's just like, I'm just enabling people to do these more and more advanced things. It's just really interesting from that piece of paper to another. I want to be able to FaceTime, and especially during the pandemic, couldn't have been more important. But the activities they're doing are changing, and I've kind of seen that. I'm sounding old now, but the fact is that the technology's changed, and they've adapted really well to it. Our patients have adapted really well to it, and they're embracing technology. So we need to be there to allow them to carry out these tasks, right?
Yeah, I think definitely I'm recommending Kindles now as opposed to recommending certain things. I think, well, it's great. You can enlarge the font, you've got it backlit, and it's lightweight. So if you've got arthritis in your shoulders, you're not having to hold it down on your lap, but you can bring it actually a bit closer. And I think this, one of the things I say to a lot of the newer optoms, the key question to ask is, what do you like to do to pass your time? Because that allows you to gather an idea of what the patient does. It allows you to think about what dispensing questions or thoughts you're going to have. And that allows you to gear your feedback as to what you think the recommendations should be for that patient.
No, absolutely. It's all about discovering your patient, isn't it? Discover what they do on a day-to-day basis. Really key.
They do really make you laugh as well, don't they? They come out with some very funny things. I had a lady a little while ago telling me all about this season's Love Island. Yeah. They don't lose it when they get into their 80s, some of them.
I think also just talking about why did we get into it, I noticed when COVID struck that I really missed going out for those 2 months and seeing people. And actually I had a gentleman who contacted me during COVID who needed an eye test, and he needed to. All his family lived abroad, New Zealand, and so he was contacting them through Skype. But his sight was poor, and unfortunately he had terminal cancer, and he knew he didn't have much longer to live, but he couldn't see his family. And I kept saying, look, I need to come in and do this test, and eventually we managed to go in and see this chap, and we got him some new glasses, and he wrote me this incredible letter afterwards, just saying how, you know, it just changed his life because now he could see his family and everything. And then sadly he passed away a few months later. But to know that for those last 2 months, you know, I'd really affected his life and made a difference to his life. Really was a really special moment.
Fantastic. I think on that note, what a great place to end our discussion. Is that all right? That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it, a whistle-stop tour of the key differences which we hope has whetted your appetite to find out more about the broad range of opportunities that exist for optometrists in the domiciliary sector. If so, your timing couldn't be better, with Outside Clinic looking to recruit lots more optometrists across the UK over the next 12 months as we look to plug the optometrist gap in the sector in our mission to ensure the people most in need of eye care don't get left behind. The recent launch of our joint venture partnership, which you heard about from Paul, builds on the existing employed opportunities we offer optometrists in a broad range of domiciliary settings, from patients' homes through to care homes and sheltered accommodation. So there really is something for everyone, regardless of what stage you are in your career or if you have prior domiciliary experience. You can learn about our latest opportunities by simply visiting outsideclinic.co.uk/discover. Through the same page, we also offer half-day sessions where interested optometrists can get a feel for what domiciliary is really like by shadowing one of our optometrists local to them. Finally, all that remains is for me to say thank you to our panel for their time and thoughts, and to you for taking the time to join this session. Our next TPD webinar is Accredited Introduction to OCT, taking place on Thursday, the 24th of November at 7 p.m. We hope to see you there.